the warrior ethos, coaching, and therapy. This is warrior leadership. Say that again. This is warrior leadership. And we're back with another episode. I believe in this season, it is number 3. And today we're going to talk about creating systems, and not just any systems, but life systems, not willpower workouts. So not just leaving life up to chance, making some real stuff happen. DB, how you doing today, brother?
Man, I'm doing good. I'm excited to get into this topic, man. I love talking about systems. It's like understanding when you think about sports. Always the best analogy to go to is sports. And I remember having this argument with this one veteran about Tom Brady. And I was like, man, Tom Brady is not an amazing football player. He's a system player. And so that dude, he broke it down. He was like, duh, that's what makes him a good player, is that he works within the system. And when you have these quarterbacks and these individuals that want to get outside of the system, you know, I can name a few. That's why they haven't been successful. That's why they haven't won Super Bowls. Systems win every single time. When you have a good system, the system it transcends the individual. And so it takes the pressure off of one person. And so I think my mindset in those kind of arguments that you get into is kind of like, it's the same thing when people say, you know, they try to compare LeBron and Michael Jordan. And we can go into a whole discussion about that, right? But the system that Michael Jordan was in, people disregard the fact that that same coach, Phil Jackson, took that system to the Los Angeles Lakers and was successful. And so I'm not saying Jordan wasn't the best still, but Jordan had an amazing system that he was in because of the coach that was on that team. And so that's what I hope we can get in today, is just talk about the importance of systems. Because, and then for me, I'm gonna speak to this from the lens of therapy and understanding why a person wouldn't want to work within a system. What kind of things I've seen in therapy and in my practice, but also in my own personal life, and kind of weave that in together to show why it would be difficult for a person to be a system player. And then, coach, hopefully we can, like we always do, just bridge that to coaching, right? And be able to continue to reinforce, you know, bridging between coaching and therapy, because no one else in the nation is talking about this the way we are, man.
I agree with that. And we will do that, because we always do that. That's why we're here. You have your lens, I have my lens, and that lens makes warrior leadership, and that lens bridges coaches and coaching and therapy. But, you know, I want to start off by saying that nothing happens by chance. So you want to talk about systems. Systems mean that you are putting something out there intentionally. You are doing things in a way that is super intentional. You know, we talked before we hopped on live here about my weight loss journey recently. Well, guess what? That didn't happen because I just went out there, and some days I decided it was time to go out there and get it in, and sometimes not. You know, all that weight loss in 2025 happened because I decided I was going to do it, figured out how I was going to do it. But the most important part is I didn't create the system. I implemented the system. I went out there and I actually freaking did it. And so, you know, let's break that down. I like to do as they say in the military. Let's break it down Barney style. You know, you crawl, walk, run. You plan, you organize, and you implement. But the implementation, the action, is always the most important. And this is part of our time management series. So, you know, if you are not making time for the things that are important, whether and you know, scheduling that stuff out, figuring out how you're going to do it, Things don't just happen by chance.
Mhm.
Then it's not going to happen.
Right.
So systems beat willpower. You can say, I will, I will, I will, I will, I can't, I can't, I can't. But ain't shit going to happen unless you go out there and make it happen.
Yeah. And coach, you know what? Your first talking point today, man, when you said systems eat motivation for breakfast, you're leaning into it. And when I heard your voice in my mind's eye when I read that talking point, but I want you to, man, tell the people what that mantra means. Systems eat motivation for breakfast, and how that, from a coaching perspective, what that means. And then I want to give some feedback on what that looks like from my lens as a therapist. But I want to get into that. Systems eat motivation for breakfast.
Let's start. I like to work. I like to work in backwards planning, and you know that. So I'm going to go ahead and break it down from the end state, which is the motivation. Well, that's the beginning and the end state, right? Because you got to go there and come back and go there again.
Mm-hmm.
You got to stay motivated, but you are going to lose yourself in the process if you get excited, but you never do anything about it.
Mm.
And so, the motivation is just a good idea that just it gets you excited, man. It pumps you up. And if a lot of people lose that motivation because they don't know how to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, they do. But moving forward means getting uncomfortable, doing all kinds of extra work and all the things, right? But to make it a little bit more comfortable, still not going to be comfortable, but to make it a little bit more comfortable, you plan it out, you talk it out.
Right.
The reason that coaching is so successful is because you have somebody having a conversation with you, asking you questions, drilling down into the eaches of their ideas and what motivates you, and helping you get to what you can take action on immediately, and putting together a plan. They don't do it for you. If you want to do that, get a consultant, right? But getting to the root, figuring out what you can take action on now, and then continuing that on whatever schedule you decide to set for yourself, and then actually doing that thing when that thing comes up on the schedule, when that thing shows up on your calendar, when that thing shows up in your day, actually doing that thing, that's going to move the needle, man. Right. It's going to move the needle on you getting in shape. It's going to move the needle on you, becoming successful in your business. It's going to move the needle on you actually pushing send on that resume so you can get that job. It's going to move the needle.
Right. Absolutely. And we talk about this over and over again, and we especially really drilled it home last podcast. And just this idea of just motivation is just this adrenaline fueled rush, if you will, that just gets us that short term burst, but it's not really sustainable over a long term. And so for me, I wanted to, I kind of reached into some of the information and knowledge that, I have about what we call family systems theory. And what I think and seen in my therapy practice, when people are having a difficult time at work, having a difficult time in any system, it really stems from just learning how to survive and overly functioning in their family system. And that willpower that sort of develops from that is where people kind of fall short, because it really comes down to trust. And so if a person has had those kind of relationships and they've had to survive, they had to be the adult when they were a child, then they show up into work environments or any type of team environment, and there's not a lot of trust for other people. And so because of that, and coach, you've done a good job of teaching me this, which is sometimes it's okay to allow it to fail. when you create the system, you know, adjust and try to improve the system and not necessarily get rid of the person. Um,
Yeah.
I'm really bad at that. I always want to get rid of the person, and that has nothing to do with it has everything to do with me not trusting the process of the system to work and me wanting to depend on my own willpower. And I know that about myself, but I wouldn't have discovered that about myself if I wouldn't have gone through my own individual counseling, understanding why I don't trust people. I don't trust people because I was raised in foster care and my parents abandoned me. And it's not an excuse. I've been really successful in life, and I'm gonna say it. I've been successful in life on willpower. So let's not get this twisted that you cannot become successful off of willpower. I believe you can become successful, but this goes beyond success. If you want to create something that's sustainable and that lives on beyond you, and we talk about legacy and all these other things all the time. If you want to build legacy, willpower alone is not enough because, and coach, you taught me this and you always drill this home, is that people, we have to focus on people. Now, that might shock some people that a coach has to tell a therapist that, but I'm being really transparent here. Just because I'm a therapist doesn't mean that I like people. I'm gonna say that again. Just because I'm a therapist doesn't mean I like people. I have a conflictual relationship with people because of the mistrust that I developed from relationships in the past, and that's why I have to use the tools that I learned in therapy to still lean into social situations. I understand it now. See, when I was a child and I reasoned like a child, I didn't realize why I was doing that, coach. Why I was just always like, hey, the minute somebody failed me, I would immediately go into willpower and I would pull myself out of it. And in my mind, I would think, see, that's why I can only depend on myself. But as I've done the deep work in therapy on myself and I've rewritten those narratives, I realized, coach, I had mentors. I had other friends that were in my circle. I disregarded those people and the systems that I was in, even when I was in church at those moments. I disregarded that I was in a system. And I thought that it was just willpower. In reality, because I was given the credit to all willpower, that I limited my power source in a sense. And that's where that motivation comes in. I ran out of fuel because I was really in my mind believing it was just me. Even though I was saying out loud, oh, I'm humble, all these other things, I was depending on me. But what I'm getting to, and this is where I'm done, eating it for breakfast means that I didn't have enough fuel for lunch.
Yeah.
I didn't have enough fuel when things got hard. And so now I find myself at 40, humbling myself truly now, believing in systems, wanting to build systems. But this is what's funny. I face so much resistance when I'm building teams. I work with multiple coalitions, multiple personalities, and you know what? I'm seeing the resistance in people, but I'm resisting the urge now to flee because we have three options: fight, flight, or freeze. I'm choosing to fight in those situations today instead of just tearing it down, building up a whole new one, working with the people that I have within the scope of what I have, even if it means for a whole year, it seems like we're just meeting. We're going in meetings. And I'm not going to get too deep into it, but I'm seeing my own growth in the fact that because I learned in therapy the root cause of the problem, and then I've had coaching, man, extensive coaching. You've coached me and other coaches. So this idea of like systems and being able to work through the system and trust it is so key, man.
I'm going to bring up something based off of what you just got done saying that a lot of people need to hear. And DB, you and I both came from a background that was rooted in trauma, not just from our military background, but from our childhood. And when you come from a background like that and you get yourself out of poverty, out of crime, out of drug abuse, all that stuff, well, you tend to think that you did that because you did that. That was me. That was me. And you know what? Part of it was
Yeah.
because you made a choice.
Yep.
But, you know, Marshall Goldsmith even wrote about it in his book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. You know, at a certain point, you got to rise above your circumstance, and, you know, your resilience changes. Your resilience needs to, your resilience and your leadership needs to now shift from self-reliance. Yeah, you made the choice. You're out of the environment. You're doing better. But now, if you want to go further, it's going to take more people. And so when we talk about building resilience, that is doing the hard things. It's not, you know, everyone thinks resilience is bouncing back when things get hard, you know, being able to bounce back from adversity. And, you know, that is part of resilience. But to build resilience is to do the uncomfortable and the hard things as much as you possibly can, so that when, I'm just going to say it, when that real shit pops up and you have to bounce back or you have to deal with those difficult situations, man, you've already trained yourself to be a warrior, because you lean into hard stuff all the time. It's not even a big deal. It's just it's just another thing. And until you can learn how to do that, I mean, a lot of people in our situation, because we rely on ourselves, we think that person, they don't know. You're right. That person, they don't know, but they do know some more about some other things. And so for you to rely on them to move to a new level means that you need to admit that you don't know what it takes to get to that level. And you need to open up and have it and start having those conversations with the people that are where you want to be, so that you can get to where they are. And you know, you already made the decision when you were in that situation rooted in trauma, the drug abuse, the poverty, the combat, you know, so on and so forth. You made the decision to move on from that. But if you want to get to that next level, you need to make another decision, and that's that you need to put yourself in that room.
That's it. That's it, man.
So that, I mean, you're already in that room. And so what you just got done describing with, you know, your difficulty with trust of others, it's not that you don't trust others already. It's just that there are some things that you're like, no, I'm not doing that.
That's it.
But you know, you can't figure that out unless you have these conversations that you're discussing. So the growth journey isn't when you go through life and get better and better and better. That's not it. No, it's when you can admit that you have faults and you get to work on those things and trust other people to help you get to that next level.
Absolutely. And coach, just the segue here, because I think you're leading right into that next point that you came up with. What was in your mind when you thought of like this idea of time blocking, batching, and boundaries? And I think for me, I think the bridge between what we were just talking about is that last B, which is boundaries. And so I'm just interested to see what was in your mind, like when you came up with that point of just time blocking, batching, and boundaries.
Well, so I got to a certain point in my career and in my life where I had work going on. I had kids with their games. I had to make time for my professional development. You know, there was a time, and I'm getting back to that again, where I was working on my own professional development by going back to school and increasing my education. And if I didn't schedule those things, if I didn't time block, if I didn't make sure that that stuff was set up in a way where I knew at this time I had to do this, and at this time I had to do this, and at that time I had to do that. And when it comes to boundaries, learning how to say no, having those conversations where you can say, you know, I would love to be able to help you with that, but at this point in time, I can't. I have a lot on my plate. It's empowering to set those physical and emotional boundaries for yourself, because you know when you are on a path, when you're on a certain trajectory for improvement, if you're not intentional about it, you lose track. You will. It's like chasing. If you see a dog go outside and they're getting scratched on the head and they're being all lovey-dovey, and all of a sudden a squirrel runs across the yard and their attention immediately shifts and they're sprinting after that squirrel. Well, we do the same thing if we're not careful. And you don't want to lose your trajectory. You don't want to. Now, there are going to be certain things that are important enough to maybe shift something throughout the day or move something to the right or left or whatever the case may be. But for the most part, you need to be disciplined enough to stick to what you're doing and make sure that the important things, the non-negotiables, get done. If they're important enough to put on your schedule, they're obviously there for a reason.
Right. Absolutely. And I love that response. And when I'm laughing because when you said, you know, the squirrel anecdote that you just gave, we went to this Boy Scout camp, and they were describing the different level of Boy Scouts, and so when they got down to the like Cub Scout, they were like, "Oops, I think I saw a squirrel." So like so you trying to get these little kids to engage in the program and do archery and different things like that, and they're just running after the squirrels, man. And it's so funny that, you know, even as adults, we get like that. We get squirrely sometimes. Like for me, it's the simplest thing as having a bunch of windows open at one time, and like here it is. It's like I'm working on this project over here. I'm working on this one. It's like, dude, that's where so when you said time blocking and batching, I was like, I realized that it's something that I see within myself, but I also see within other people as well that I work with. And this is this is where, you know, when you think about chaos and coming from chaos and being in situations where there's no boundaries really, that, to be honest with you, I think that you learn to thrive in chaos. So essentially there is a system that's created. It's a chaotic system. It's not effective, but it's there, and you learn to work within the chaos. And so because you're successful to a degree within the chaos, then it's like negative reinforcement. And I know that that's definitely been the case for me. And I wrote something down that I think is powerful, that as I was just reflecting on this and preparing for this, is that actually when we create systems, we end up becoming more psychologically safe because it's predictable. We can, to a degree, predict it when we create a system. That's not saying that things won't go wrong, but it made me, I had to just sit with that for a moment and say, wow, you can actually develop psychological safety from creating a system. So then the question becomes, do I really want to be safe? Or do I thrive in it? Do I want to thrive in the chaos? That's the question that I have to ask myself. That's the question anyone has to ask themselves, because the idea of the system being greater than one person or their willpower, we've already hashed that out. We all know that to be true. So now, if you truly want to be beyond what you see as successful and actually successful, if that makes sense, not based on your perception, then you have to be willing to go outside of yourself and create something that's predictable. Because even then, in that moment, when something goes awry or there's a mistake, Then you can look at the process and fix the process, coach. And that's where coaching comes in at, where you can say, all right, I took my emotions and my feelings out of it, and now I'm working within this system. And so now I can see where the breaches are in the holes and I can fix it. And then the system can still function.
Yeah. From a leadership and operations perspective, usually when something is going outside of the norm on your team, my advice to people who are in a leadership position is to separate yourself from it, take a step back and observe the landscape and look at the bigger picture. What really has changed? And you won't be able to figure it out unless you separate yourself and kind of look at the whole situation. Well, from an individual perspective, it's the same way. When something is going crazy in your life and you're not getting success, look at what's happening. Examine your calendar. If you don't put it on the calendar, some people rely on something we had in the military called a battle rhythm. And what it would be is just basically every morning from 8 to 12, these are the things that you have to do. And if you've noticed that something is outside of the norm on your schedule, or something has been interrupting that on a regular basis, or if you notice there's something that you've been missing on your battle rhythm, or if it's your fitness routine, if you notice that you've been slacking off more than a couple days a week, or whatever the case may be, or maybe your diet has been screwed up. I mean, look at what you normally do to win and try to figure out what's been interrupting that. If you don't, I mean, it's that Albert Einstein thing. You're going to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and you're going to go insane. And so, when you are designing these bigger routines for yourself to figure out what works and what doesn't, if you don't have anything set up, no system at all, and that chaos thing that you got done talking about a little bit ago, Derek, where your day goes really, really fast. Well, if you don't have anything set up as a system at all, that chaos wins 100% of the time. You don't have anything that you can look at to get back to. You don't have anything you can look at as the next thing. You don't have anything. That means that the external factors control you. If you don't want to be controlled by your external factors, you need to get ahead of it and have a plan. And that's really all this time blocking and all this other stuff. That's all that is you're making a plan for yourself. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
That's it. And when you create a system and for me, I've watched a system I created based on a strategic vision of my of the work that I have, and everyone else can't see the picture, right? Like, it's like connect the dots, and everyone else doesn't quite see it yet. And I talk about it so much. I've been talking about it for the last 4 years. The infrastructure that I'm building. Everybody doesn't see the vision. Some people are starting to see it, but the vision was in my mind years ago, because I interviewed tons of people, spent time looking at their systems and figuring out I've done SWOT analysis after SWOT analysis after SWOT analysis with different communities, and now it all of that information and knowledge, because, and this is something that you really drilled home for me, Coach, which is, it's kind of like a Gemba walk. You go to where the work is being done. We can talk about, all these like Myers-Briggs and all these things. You taught me this. You go to the people and you talk to them. And so any vision that I have and any plan that I'm executing, it's informed by people. by the people who will be affected by the system. Those are the people who are going to be, you're going to utilize the product or the service. And so when you go to them, your information, and when you advocate for a change within a system, because that's a whole nother talk we can get into, is that, change management. What change management is really a conversation that we're having no matter what we're talking about with leadership. And so people within a certain system may not see the value or the validity in a system change, but when you're a leader on the ground with people, your vision is created by their suffering. And so for me, it's exciting to see that after 4 years of getting out into the community and connecting with people, that vision is starting to come alive. And when you see it starting to come alive like that, it's like when we were kids, when you do connect the dots, you see the picture clearly, because you're like, wow, look at where I started and look at where I'm at now. Perspective, right? And you like, oh, this system, going back to what we're saying here, is just like, it was, and to be honest, the shift happened when I started putting these intentional goals, small goals within my schedule, batching and saying what's most important, not important. And one of my leaders, my supervisors within my system, she said this to me: you have to learn how to pivot. And I wrote this down in my notes at work so I can get back to it every single day. The power of the pivot. And so certain individuals, and I'm sharing that as a strategy because I think it's important when we talk about prioritizing and batching and all these things we're saying. There is a peace of mind when you're trying to get something done with a certain individual, or trying to do whatever, and you're facing resistance. When you can pivot away from that and come back to it later, because it'll probably be there later, and go on to the next task, that's important. And I think that's the number one thing that I'm excited that I was able to develop in this last 4 years, is just pivot away from a situation. And then if it's supposed to happen, it'll come back to you. And what I've noticed is that every single time, Coach, when I pivot away from one idea and I start working on something else because it's on my schedule next up to do, then that thing that I walked away from, it came back full circle. I didn't have to push and pull. It just ended up flowing. And just for me, just the power of the pivot and not getting stuck in one thing, and moving on to that next important task. What's important and urgent, and maybe the thing that you think is important and urgent now isn't important and urgent for the people who you're talking to. And that's okay. And I've learned that you got to be okay with that kind of stuff.
Well, so let's debrief that for a second. You're not going to like me. So,
No,
because
go ahead.
I kind of have something to say. You said something a couple minutes ago that was very, very crucial to what you're saying. Sometimes you got to debrief these situations when other people are not buying into your mission. Part of leadership is making sure that people do buy into your mission and vision. And if vision is created sometimes, probably not always, but your vision is sometimes created through other people's suffering, and you need them to have buy-in for whatever solution that you come up with. Sometimes just making sure how you can relate that vision to them and find their the benefit to them, so that when you are having that conversation, when you're briefing that narrative, you're getting their buy-in, because they're like, oh, well, that would work for me because I did go through that. Then what you're doing is you're taking that vision, and you're not just hoping for the buy-in of others, you're creating that buy-in from others. And oftentimes people make the mistake of taking too long to explain it. Sometimes people make the mistake of making it about and I don't think this is probably you, it's actually the opposite, but we get caught up in wanting to talk about why that vision was important to us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so making sure there's clarity around the benefits for them instead of the benefits for us is what will create the buy-in. And if you have multiple teams, I know you have coalitions all over the place, but when you have multiple teams out there that you're trying to get the buy-in for these missions, each one is going to have their own mission and vision. So making sure that they understand how that overall mission and vision benefits them, and then driving it home that way is gonna, it'll come back full circle if you leave it alone. But if you brief the benefits to them based off of what they've already told you is what they have going on, and man, I almost guarantee that it's almost going to be like you're turning their head in your direction.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be like, oh, I see it now.
Yeah.
I was blind before, but now I see.
Right. Of course. Of course. And no, and that's a really good point. What's in it for them? And the what's in it for them, sometimes people don't see. Look, put it like this. And this, look, if I am talking to you and I took the time to look, I have a process called a landscape analysis where I literally study and find certain people who I want to partner with. And I don't call you or reach out to you unless I know there is something in it for you. If I'm calling you, there is something for you in it for you. When I first started this role though, and this journey, if you will, it was more of it's about the veterans. You should be selfless. I thought like that. And you've echoed this to me. Other people have said this to me. I do have to look at it and what's in it for them because it's about their time management. And so now if I'm reaching out to you or calling you, there is something in it for you. It's directly tied to, and in my world, we call it a metrics or productivity. Everybody has to prove why they're doing what they're doing and how that contributes to the mission and vision. Like you just said, the mission and vision of their program. And so if I'm reaching out to you, this is a direct connection to something that you will need. And so what I've learned though is that if trying to hone that in and be very specific, and you said it earlier, sometimes more is less. I mean, less is more. When you say less and just get right to the point of, look, hey, you work with people that are justice involved. And right now, you don't even speak you don't even use the word suicide within your programming. But if you start saying that workshop that you do promotes connectedness, and promoting connectedness will prevent suicide, what you've just done is you opened up a stream of funding that you don't currently have. And as a nonprofit, you need any funding that you can get in order to sustain your nonprofit, your operations. And so this isn't about, look, me just getting you to buy into the idea of suicide prevention. It's getting you to see that you're actually already doing suicide prevention, but are you documenting it that way? And so I've learned to do that. And every time I go into a situation, whether it's with an employer, a different nonprofit organization, I'm always finding and saying, hey, that program you do is linked to this. And because it's linked to that, you're actually doing this. Did you realize that? And then finally, now because of that, now the wheels are turning. And I'm gonna say it right here. Look, at the end of the day, money is what greases the wheels and causes. It's a resource, and it helps organizations grow. It helps organizations sustain. And so I've learned how to have the money conversation, even though I can't get them the money directly. I can't give it to them, but I'm showing them how you justify beyond just, oh, this is just feel good. And my statistics teacher taught me this. Is like, hey, if what you're doing makes people feel good, that's great. But what are the outcomes? Because in our society now, we want to know how you're helping people, and that's with anything, right? And so for me, it's learning how it's been learning how to deliver that and hone that message in. And what I just said, that was in a sentence or two. Either and look, and it just ends up coming down to this: either you want to sustain your programming and help people and help the most people as you can, or you don't, or you want to be comfortable because that same elevator pitch that you didn't listen to, I can walk right around the corner and go tell another nonprofit the same thing, or another business, and they'll see it and they'll say, wow, you know what, you're right, let's do that. Let us start seeing that we're actually doing this already. And that just doesn't apply to suicide prevention. That applies to anything. And I think my overall point is just that I've learned to schedule it, put that kind of stuff within my schedule, to be intentional about building these relationships with people, setting boundaries, making sure I'm spending enough time with it, because I don't just give up on people and on organizations, because when I truly know that it's a right fit, but it's not a right fit for right now, for whatever reason, operationally, they're just not ready to take on they don't have the manpower or whatever to do it, I will continue to, show up in some capacity. So when I said pivot earlier, I don't completely abandon the group. I'll still show up. Like, for example, there's a group I'm working with. They have quarterly meetings. I'm at every quarterly meeting. Even if I don't say anything, I'm still in the room. I still have a seat. And so pivoting, though, is when I say pivot, I mean not applying so much pressure to expect the result today. Because I know how I am. I'm very ambitious, Coach. You know this. Sometimes I want a yes today, and people are like, wait. They didn't really say no. They said wait, but when I hear wait is no to me. And I'm just like, I'm just like, no, we need to close this deal today.
Well, see, that's a business growth principle. But remember, this is actionable leadership advice that people can use. So, I just wanted to make sure that people understood, because I already knew you did all those things. You and I have talked about it at length, but making sure that, when it comes to your team and you have a vision for an upcoming project or a mission or whatever the case may be, that you don't just abandon the conversation. I know I'm a business owner, brother. So I already know that you can't, if somebody's not drinking the Kool-Aid when you're doing a pitch, you can't put too much emphasis on that conversation. If it's a no, you got to move on, because guess what? Opportunity could be knocking on the next door. But when it comes to your team, you don't have that choice. Say you're working for a factory or something like that, and you're having a hard time with a new thing that you're implementing with your team for the organization. And a lot of people make the mistake of briefing that the vision for that change and the mission. They make the mistake of saying too much and not getting to the point, or saying things in a way where people are like, oh, we got to do this shit again. And, so making sure that you don't abandon that when you're working for a company is extremely important, because you got to make sure that your team is always on the same sheet of music as you are. And if they're not, finding out why. And business, running a business and going out and doing those things, or with what you do for the organization that you work for, and going out into the community, it's the same set of business principles for growing a business. There's a difference between that and organizational leadership. But I wanted to make sure we were clear, because we are definitely talking about the psychological safety and the leadership growth within an organization oftentimes. And so bridging that coaching and therapy realm is part of that, is making sure that we're helping these leaders out there grow as individuals and grow their teams.
Absolutely. Can we get to this one? I know we went over, but that's fine. I think we're having a really good discussion. And so when you're having a good discussion, you just let it flow.
You
But
do.
Coach, I really want to get some feedback on this one, which is design routines that run without you.
So when it comes to a system, it is important that it's duplicatable. So in other words, say you're working at an organization and you're an operations manager for a specific set of operations. And this can apply to a bunch of different things. But if you can duplicate that same system and help other people implement that. So say you get promoted, now you're not the operations manager, you're the operations director, and you have multiple operations managers across multiple teams through sometimes even multiple states. You can create some systems that operate with them that you don't have to worry about. And so these time management principles, these time blocking principles, these setting boundaries as a leader, these principles that we're talking about in this conversation today, figuring out how to make it simple. We use the acronym KISS all the time. Keep it stupid simple. When other people ask you, well, how are you managing to do all this stuff? And you just having some fun comment to go along with that, that's not helping that other person at all. Tell them. It's what I do is so simple. And all I do is I block my time to make sure that I have room in my schedule for all of the most important things. And that way I know what I need to reschedule, what I need to keep doing. And, you know, if you can help other people understand the principles of time management, and you go along and you know that when you get an appointment, you put it on your calendar. You know that when you have a major event, that it goes on your calendar. And you follow that calendar to a T because that's what your discipline tells you to do, and that's what your system tells you to do. Then all you have to do for a battle rhythm every day is show up to work, check your emails, look at your calendar, and show up.
Yep, I got you. And you know, I think for me, that battle rhythm that you spoke of, you keep that you reiterating over and over again. There is a rhythm that's created, and there's a system within the larger system that I work with that's created that actually, for whatever it's worth, people complain about it from the outside looking in, but unless you're in it, you really don't understand the why behind it. I have a better understanding of the why behind it. And to be honest with you, some of the principles I'm learning, I do replicate in my own private practice, or at least attempting to, because there's a lot to learn. It's so complex, and sometimes complex is always looked, and this word is thrown around a lot. And we think about bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is thrown around a lot, and within bureaucracy, a system that is so complex and trying to serve people, it has to have these routines and things in place. If not, we'll get off into the weeds and we'll lose sight of what's most important. And so I've learned to appreciate the level of the fact, I'm in this systems redesign class right now, yellow belt training, and just learning the intricacies of the system and understanding wow, man, when you pull one lever over here, it's just this chain reaction to every other thing, right? But then also seeing where, because of that, seeing how things can be, how silos can be broken up just by communicating with someone. Because when you put yourself in the process, you see all right, well, if I just would, and a lot of people, they hate this. They're like, why do we keep meeting? if you don't keep meeting, then and you speak of this a lot, coach, which is these after actions review. If we're not meeting and communicating with each other, how do we know how to adjust, which way to go, if the system we just implemented is working or not? And so for me, I think I've learned to stop saying that and get okay with being with meeting, because that's how we learn, that's how we grow, that's how we make sure that the system is functioning the way that it's supposed to. And no one's bigger than the system. And that's the thing that I've really recognized, that because certain systems, they have a lot of pressure from the outside and from the inside, and so in order for the system to maintain, it has to create structure. It has to create these, like, what we consider as red tape. They have to create it, and they
Yeah.
have to take those steps. And I
Yeah.
think to the average human being, it gets frustrating because you got to fill out the form, and then this form has to go to this person, and we just want to jump the step. And it's like, no, there's a system in place, and that, I can go on and on about that. But like, when we create a routine for ourselves, that outside noise, that outside pressure won't move the system, because we're still going to go step one, step two, step three, step four, step five. Even if if there's 10 steps in the process, right? That's where we look at process improvement. When you think about like becoming what we call a high reliability organization, we will always look at processes that have too many steps and figure out how we can streamline them. But that takes time. And the larger you are, the harder it is to, hone in on each individual process. But I think I'm learning so much about just being patient, man. As a human being, we can be very patient and impatient, I should say. And I think for me, I just wanted to make this point about this particular point. I know that in past times, I've gotten like excited about something, or I'll have a mindset like, I think I call it like hyper responsibility, where I feel this indebtedness to solve the problem, and that's willpower, right? And because of that, sometimes, because it's not working fast enough and I'm seeing the human suffering on the ground, I want to take a committed action right now. But the system says, no, we need to study that further before we commit to an action, and then we commit to an action. And so that's the system. That's the way the system works. Now, Derek can get frustrated. He can try to circumvent it, all those things, or Derek can work within the system and allow for the process to develop, and for because that way, then you get people's buy-in. People are willing to work with you, and I'm noticing that I've gotten much further with that. And you know what? The pressure and the weight is off of me. And now I'm looking at it like, wow, now I'm a part of multiple high performing teams, not just outside of the system, even inside of the system. And so when I let go of that hyper responsibility, like, and put it all on me, and this all spills over into my business now. But ultimately, when I decide to go full time into my business, I don't want, and you told me this, coach, a year ago or a year or more ago, I don't want to be hyper responsible for my business. If not, I'm going to be a micromanager. I'm going to become the manager that I always got frustrated with. I don't want to be hyper responsible and think I have to hold everything together. I don't
Yeah.
want that weight and responsibility. I want to spread the responsibility around to my staff, to the people around me. And again, that's, for me, that's showing my growth, because I know why I have a hard time spreading the responsibility, and I know where it's rooted in, but I'm not letting that fear overtake me, because that's not strength. Like, to be hyper responsible about something, that's not showing strength. That's actually showing fear and weakness. And so my strength now, that's been developed, and what I'm helping other people realize, even as I develop in my process, is like, hey, you don't have to do it all. You don't have to know everything. You have to like trust the process. And so that's my last word, man.
Yeah. there, that's not always a systems issue, actually. Usually that is a leadership issue. We want so much for things to happen, and we want so much for things to change, and we want so much for things to be the best that we have to avoid those knee-jerk reactions and look at whether or not it's important enough to push. I mean, and if you push too hard, are you going to ruin relationships? If you don't push hard enough, is anything going to change? I mean, it's there's a balance that has to be implemented in order for anything to work. I mean, if you just let that motivation take over and you turn into this guy that's known for just being the good idea fairy because you're changing things all the time, well, you know, it's not wrong to have good ideas, but it is wrong to think that you have to derail operations all the time because you have a great idea and every single great idea that you have, it needs to be implemented. That's an ego issue, actually. And so balance, there's got to be balance. And when people see that you're trying to stand in the corner and carry everything and only action on what's important, they're going to empathize with you and they're going to help you. But if you just are pushy and think that everything that you do is the most important thing that's going on all the time, you're going to lose everyone. And so you're right. That is the hardest thing. Systems are important. Working within the system is important. Knowing when to not necessarily circumvent, but to push the boundaries of that system a little bit, that's also important. That's it. God, it when you're working within a system or you're trying to create one of your own, creating that balance is that's how the sustainability happens. So
Wow.
that
was
it's
good.
well, my goodness, man, it's hard. It's really, really these principles that we discuss on here, they're very, very simple. But when you have to go and put these principles and implement them into your day-to-day workings, leadership, systems, managing, all of this stuff, there's so much balance and so many considerations that you have to take into account when you're doing these things. It's not easy. It's not hard to understand, but it's not easy either. It's just so much. So thank you for bringing that up, because that is something that everybody has to consider when they're going through this process of growth, is that there's got to be balance. When you take away from something else to give to another thing, you're still taking away from that other thing. And so you got to make sure that you are being not careful, but intentional, making sure that you understand the risks, rewards, the positives, the negatives, all of the things. And so thank you for, you brought up a lot of very good stuff there. And just acknowledging that this stuff is not easy is very, very important. What do you have for closing comments? Because we're almost at an hour. This has been an awesome conversation.
Yeah, I have something, actually. Just one closing remark here, or comment, really. So you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems.
You do. You do. And I'll add to that with what I just got done saying. The game is built on balance. Go out there and make it happen. Be intentional with it. But know that when you're building these systems, you are sacrificing in some ways and benefiting in others, and balance it all out, because that's how you win. But before we go, got to put a plug in for this guy. Speak Up, Show Up, Lead. This is my book. It can be found on Amazon. It's my story of grit, growth, and leadership from the ground up. It's for the little guy. If you're in a place where you don't feel like you can move forward and that everything is happening to you and not for you, this is for you. It's the lessons that I've learned through my crazy existence that I framed in a way that will help you move forward, hopefully, in your journey. And it's all about leadership. Thank you, DB. This was a great podcast. We will move on again in a couple of weeks. And for all you warriors out there, keep leading with intention and do what you got to do. Stay mentally and physically safe in the workplace, and make sure it's a good place for other people to work as well. That's it. This was another episode of Warrior Leadership. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and the most important thing is to put a comment below wherever you see this so that we can keep the conversation going. Have a great couple of weeks.